Quick note for everybody. By the way, this very Christmas Eve day, Isabel Teran, who is my guest, is releasing her Christmas episode of her podcast, That's Bodacious Dude. So you should go over there and listen to her talking about the movie Gremlins. And today we are going to be talking about the Christmas special, Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. You should listen to both of them, but wanted to make sure you know, That's Bodacious Dude. Christmas special is also out now.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Valley of Ho-Ha-Ho, or is it Hi-Ha-Ha or Hee-Hee-Ho? I don't remember the name of the valley, but we'll get into why it's called that. But as you've certainly already guessed, this is the special holiday episode, the new one, of The Broken Brain this year. We are going to be talking about the life and adventures of Santa Claus. As everyone knows, we have a little tradition around these parts on the show of going over different Christmas specials, which are a big part of the holiday time for me and my own upbringing in life. And I really enjoy thinking about some of them, especially ones that not everybody has watched. And so today is certainly no exception to that, as I find that many people have never heard of this Christmas special. So I'm joined by Isabel Teran of the Hersing Around, and that's Bodacious Dude podcast. What's the second one called? That's the one I've been on. What's it called?
Yeah, that's Bodacious Dude. But
That's
there's also
Bodacious
this
Dude.
whole 80 radical movies from the 80s. It's very long. So we usually just say, that's Bodacious Dude.
That's Bodacious Dude. Yes. Two great shows. And also of the fame of being a return guest to The Broken Brain also is another, a great thing about you as a person. So welcome, Izzy.
I feel so welcome. Thank you.
This is very interesting because this kind of ties in with an award-winning episode that you put out of your podcast, That's Bodacious Dude, talking about the 80s movie Return to Oz. That I was grateful to be invited on, and has since won. I don't remember how many prestigious podcasting awards it's won since then, but it's got
won the talkie.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be dozens by now, right? And it's interesting because I hadn't thought about this, and I didn't know this back when I was a kid and watched this. But the Christmas special, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, is based off of a book written in 1902 by Lyman Frank Baum, well, usually known as L. Frank Baum. I didn't know that his name was Lyman until today when I was looking up when this movie came out and when the book came out. Which reportedly, according to something I read somewhere, also this takes place adjacent to or within the same universe as the Land of Oz. Santa Claus exists in the Ozverse. Right?
That's what I had read too, and I was like, oh wow, I never thought about that. I mean, when I watched this when I was younger, I just thought it was a different story about Santa Claus. I didn't even realize the connection to Wizard of Oz at all until recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had seen it years and years ago, and I got to thinking today. I was like, I should read that book. I haven't read that book. I read a lot of the Oz books. For people who don't know, the L. Frank Baum wrote, I think it was like 13 or something, Oz books that take place. The Wizard of Oz is the first one, but there's a bunch of others, and has an extended lore and all kinds of things, that you get there, and many of them include a map that shows the Land of Oz, which is surrounded by a desert that if you step foot on it, you turn into sand. That's why you always have to get there through balloons or cyclones. The science checks out, Izzy.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah.
But I believe that on the map, that Santa lived off to the side on the side of the desert that is in the rest of the world, I guess. If I remember correctly, that's where it was on the one in the library book that I checked out a long time ago.
Yeah, in the Ho-Ha-Ho Valley or something.
Ho-Ha-Ho.
Yeah, the Valley of Ho-Ha-Ho.
Oh, well, so what's your background with this? You had seen this before. And this is a show, by the way, that when I tell people, it's one of those ones that I mention and people go, I don't know what that is. And then many of us have had this experience where we explain something in culture, a piece of media, and the more we explain it, the more someone's like, yeah, whatever. Shut up, Dwight. You're just making this up.
No, I mean, I've always been huge on watching the Rankin and Bass movies as a kid, especially during Christmas time. I mean, just every single one, anything stop motion that I can watch, I was watching it, and God, I feel like I've pretty much seen all of them, quite possibly.
It's
I think there's like 16 of them or something, and
There's
I feel like
more
I've
than
seen almost
people
all of
think.
them. Yeah. As far as Christmas goes, there's at least 16, but then, you have other ones like, Mad Monster Party and stuff, which I also really love.
I don't know that one. See, I need to get going on some of my Rankin and Bass because I felt like I had seen. Then you and Ryan were talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, "There's more to this universe than I." I knew there were a couple I hadn't seen, but I just felt proud that I knew what Life and Adventures of Santa Claus was and New Year's. Or whatever it's called, Rudolph's Shiny New Year, right? Those ones that
Yeah.
other people have never watch. But then there's like, yeah, there's what the Miser Brothers or the something like that. There's the Year
That
Without
was
Santa
a year,
Claus.
yeah, a year without a Santa Claus that has the Miser Brothers and Mother Nature, who is the mother over the Miser Brothers and everything. I just love it. It's so stinking cute. I love that one. It was even like everybody was like at work, and we were dressing up as like random Christmas characters, and I was like, oh no, I'm late to this game. What can I do? And I just got some like red construction paper and like made a little fiery looking hat, and that was my costume because I was wearing a red shirt, and then I painted my nose red, and I was like, I'm like the heat miser. Makes sense
Yes.
living in Texas. So
Well, and people who heard the podcast know because there's this episode about this, and I once again the other tradition that I do around Christmas is I'll drop reruns of some of the old Christmas episodes of the podcast because I know y'all want more of me. Come on, why not? But one of them I did with my brother and sister where we talked about the VHS tape that we tapes. It was a few tapes where we each year would record Christmas specials, whichever ones were on. And that's where we got some that were like, that's a Christmas, I've never heard of that, let's record it. So anything that was on that after about 2.5 of 3 years of taping, right? Somewhere in the second year, we just kind of stopped recording any new ones and we just watched the tons because we had too many to watch in one night, right? And so we
yeah.
would just, whenever we had a lull in the evening during the Christmas season, we'd throw in one of these tapes. And if then we would usually have one big night where we'd throw sleeping bags out and just fall asleep watching Christmas
Aw.
specials. It was like streaming before streaming could stream, is what we like
Yeah.
to say. So if it didn't
You had
make
to
it
catch
onto
the
one of those
specials at times.
tapes, yes. If it didn't make it onto one of those tapes, I don't know it. And if it did, I know it no matter how little anybody else knows it. So, that's always been a weird little thing about Christmas specials for me. So knowing this comes in, this show, I remember watching it as a kid, and my first reaction was like, "What the what?" Like, because this is a different take on Santa Claus, and knowing that it came from a fantasy author in a book that is sort of connected with a greater lore actually does make more sense when you watch this, right?
Yeah, I kind of wish we could get a new version that kind of leans into that and kind of makes it more like Return to Oz. That would be really cool. Because there
Yes.
is some, dark tones on this, just like there is with Wizard of Oz, really. Um, I mean, because especially there's like this time where, well, I mean, if we're going into the movie, like where, I guess, what is it? The Great Act takes them around the world to see how the mortals
Yes,
live and everything.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that could be very dark. I mean, it was back in the 80s, so they made it, like a kids style movie, but I'm like, this could have been darker.
No, it's interesting how much is in there for a special, and that's one of the things I want to kind of get into. We'll kind of loosely outline, but we can talk about it as we go. But so we open up, and right away, speaking of like the heavy overtones of this, I like that they do seem to have a pretty good balance where they don't. I don't know. Judgment out there. I'll be interested in what you think. I don't think they overdo it, but they don't like soft shoe around the fact that, I mean, we open up saying, well, Santa's going to die. That's the first thing that happens.
Yeah, basically.
We see Santa coming back from and he looks very much like the Santa we know, with the big white beard and everything.
Yeah.
And he lands the sleigh, and he's like, well, time to die, or wherever he goes in. And somehow, like, we know, as is the way in stories, it's like, this is his last night, his last ride, but he's going to die tonight. And so cut to this, or it's at the same time we're seeing this enchanted forest, right? And we pick up from this conversation that there's these immortal beings that are coming together for a conference. And this is where we're introduced to the Great Ack, who's this big guy with this wonderful, huge wooden antler horn crown that he's wearing. Just a big old kind of dude with a booming kind of voice, right? And
yeah.
he's like, this will be Santa's last night if I can't convince them. And we're like,
we have to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I do remember that as a kid being like, what? Santa's going to die? What are we doing? What's going on?
What is happening? And it's also like this huge departure from like Santa Claus is coming to town and basically the lore from that. And if you don't realize that this is a completely different story, and it's Rankin and Bass, so I almost was like, this isn't what you told me earlier, though. This isn't how Santa grew up.
Yes, and it was interesting to see something. I remember I wasn't used to something being Santa-centric in this way either. A lot of them were just Santa is here, right? Yeah. He's just kind of omnipresent being who's just around, and his sort of magic and immortality is not up for discussion or debate. It just is, right? And so that's what. So it's a good hook. Let me put it. I will say, I think my favorite part of this as a kid, and I know for sure my favorite character, but one of my favorite parts as a kid was all of these creatures, these immortals coming in, and they're being announced by who you're going to learn is Tingler. And by the way, a sound imp is a great device. He's a little creature who can speak all languages of all animals and people, but he forgets to use the right one, so he's always going.
Which is understandable. Yeah, people who are like multilingual also have that issue sometimes. I'm sure. Yes. It's a real problem. Like, oh, I got excited and I used the wrong language. My bad.
And so this is where it's kind of funny, with it being just this one limited Christmas special, to have all these creature people come in, and they all have these names like, the guardian of the nooks, and you're like, I don't know what a nook is, but I'm interested, right?
Yeah.
and
they look like little dragons or something. I don't know.
Yes, and they factor heavily into the story for something that we don't know what they are. My favorite is this guy, let's see, commander of the wind demons. I wrote it down to make sure I got his name right. He was my favorite because he has this weird purple face, and he'd open up his like, big robe and wind and like hurricane blowing comes out and everything. And I just remember being fascinated by him because he also talks more than the other ones do throughout the story. So I don't know. Did you have a favorite of the creature?
No, that was my favorite. Was the wind one? He looks really far out. I like the way he looked, and he did have probably the most lines. Like, and that's all. We're just saving him because kids like him, and it's like, no, let me explain. He's like, oh, okay, well then continue.
Yes. Right. Because the Great Ack is like, we don't want this guy to die, and everybody's like, what? And he's like, let's hear him out.
That's accurate. That is an accurate impression too.
Yes, I know. Everybody, it wasn't a clip, guys. It was really me. It was really me doing the commander. I'm really sending Commander of Wind Demons today.
Man, what did it remind me of too, though? With Wind Demons, there's a movie that has all these different winds and oh, you know what? It wasn't a movie at all. I'm thinking of HR Puffin stuff. My bad.
Oh, there you go.
They have the winds talking, and of course the west wind is like a cowboy wind, and it's bad. It's not great.
Well, when we get this flashback, to start, it's like, let's start, and I gotta love the way that this opens up when he's like, where shall I start? And the queen is like, at the beginning, and he's like, oh, right. And then they start, and at the beginning, and he finds a baby. And once again, I made another little note this time. It's so interesting that you talk about the darkness part, because one of my main takeaways watching it for this was, oh, this is not like, this is showing some of the heaviness of the world. So he finds this baby, a human baby, and he tells, what is it, Shiegra, the lioness? He's like,
Yeah.
take care of this baby. And then he's telling everybody, he's like, yeah, she would have eaten him if I wouldn't have told her to take care of him.
Yes. There's so many moments like that. Like they just talk it away. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that would have been a midnight snack for her, but you know,
Right.
I let her know.
I told her not to eat him. And so,
Like,
and I will
guess.
say, of all the poking fun of this, I do actually, the lore makes me want to know more, obviously.
Yes.
But the design, just like with the other Rankin Bass, they're all cute and cool. I like these specials. But this one, there is a real opportunity for some real kind of artistry. Like I want to, it's not like Pan's Labyrinth exactly. However, it's a lot more that way than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Not to overstate it, but
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want like Henry Selick to do a remake, still make it claymation, but just more evolved, you know,
Yeah.
like completely immersed in all of that. Like, I don't know.
this is pretty good. I like this one.
Like when they do the war, let's have some real blood and guts. I want to see them
See that.
be dispatched. Like,
Yes, there's a war in this Christmas special, which is interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to get into the. Now, I did think it was interesting. This was made in the 80s, everybody, and I'm not going to say it would be better now. But of course, we get, is it Seal? Did I write that? I wrote my
yeah, and the seal.
yeah,
Yeah.
Seal, one of the wood fairies or whatever, is
Yeah, the
like
wood nymph.
she's got baby fever apparently, even though she's never seen a baby or heard of one before, or even been one herself. They make
That's how
that very
powerful
clear.
they are. Yeah.
None of them were ever babies. They were created the way they were immediately.
And she saw that baby, she had the baby smell, and she's like, no, I must have this I must have this child.
Has a whole song about how she's been missing having a child. Maybe.
She didn't even know it.
So
I was like, okay, that's a little all right. That's fine.
it's maybe,
I guess.
yeah, a little old fashioned in the way that is just accepted. That,
Yeah.
of course, she's still a woman.
That's with the time.
Even if, yeah, exactly. No, but so she takes an interest, and it was funny. So now, for all the teasing that I'm doing about it, when we get into the whole, would you call me mom? What's a mom? It's something mortals call the one who raised it. Well, then you're my mom. I started to cry. So I'm not.
Oh my God.
So I'm not as cool
Yeah.
as I'm trying to act like I am here.
No, definitely. Like I as well. I talked my little smack, but no, that part I was like, he calls her mother. Like,
She's his
oh my
mom.
God, I'm
Yeah,
okay. I'm
absolutely.
okay. We're good.
And speaking as someone who has some kids that are a bit older, when they say things like, when she says, is this normal for kids? Like, yeah, they grow up and they turn in. He's above average, for a human. And she's just like, I just mean I miss the baby. And I
Yeah,
was like, oh, I do too.
little babies.
It's true. I do.
The closest I have is my nephew and my nieces. I think that's it.
So we get to follow him. We have a kind of a quick montage of him growing up in the woods, in his enchanted woods, never knowing exactly what is he in comparison to anyone else. Which also, and by the way, and other past episodes over Christmas will see. Another one I think I'm rerunning this year, so people have probably heard it if they were listening religiously to every episode, like all of you should be. That Sharon Blady and I were talking about Marvel Comics' depiction of Santa and some of the other sort of Santa legends over time. So I'm a big sucker for Santa stories, and I think it was very interesting. And this gets right into what you were just about to talk about, or you mentioned earlier with the trip around the world, is here's someone who grew up without any concept of who am I in relation to any other human being. Just
Yeah.
I am, and I'm here, and I'm loved and accepted and cared for. And then the great act at some point is like, I need to introduce you to what humans are. And I think, well, won't that be fun to see what they're like? And
No,
then
it's
he gets
not.
to go and see. Yes, I did. I had kind of forgot. It's been years since I've watched this, and so I had kind of forgotten about this part of it, where he goes on this little whirlwind tour of Earth. So
Yeah,
it was
and it
fascinating.
kind of
What did you think?
reminds me a little bit of like the Christmas Carol, like the Ghost of Christmas Present, because nobody can see them and they're just observing it, and it kind of gave me the vibes of that. But um Otherwise, yeah, that's where I feel like as you're seeing each one, I was like, wow, if you read this, you could lean in, I guess, to that darkness of those trials and tribulations because he was like, I'm trying to get in here and protect these kids because, like, why do they have to deal with this? I don't understand because you've never had to deal with that. You've
Yeah.
never
Never had to
been
deal
put
with
in these
hunger or
situations.
cruelty. Right.
Like,
Yeah,
all
I
of
mean,
this.
the very first place they go is to a field of serfs that are harvesting turnips,
Hmm.
and one of them is trying to sneak off to eat one, the little kid, and the taskmaster is like, yelling at him. And then they go up to this castle and they're sitting there just stuffing their faces and complaining about, I can't believe these serfs who are trying to one of them tried to steal a turnip. Can you believe
How
it?
dare
And
they?
yeah.
And you try to read? You don't want to read, right, servant? Like,
And it was really interesting.
what?
And I realize more and more when I go back and look at things that I saw, in my youth, I realize how much that has informed some of what I've learned to think about the world. Right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting to look back and say there was that scene was just basically you could drop it in, let's say, I don't know, nowadays,
Yeah.
and here's someone who's just like, wow, I can't understand why they're not more grateful to have jobs, right? And that they want to read and write, and he turns to his. We all, turn around to his social circle as someone from that socioeconomic stratus, who is the guy serving him food. You don't want to read and write, do you? He's like, of course not. You
Why
know,
would I want to do that? If I said yes, also you'd probably have me killed. So
right, exactly.
like,
And so there's a real picture that we're getting right away of this cruelty. And here's
mm,
Santa observing this as a kid, right, as a young man starting to learn. And then we go on from there to learn about war, how people
yeah,
go to war and kill each other. And in fact, there's a line where he even says to the great axe, so when men disagree with each other, they kill each other. As it, do they do this for a good cause? And he says, sometimes, but usually no.
yeah,
And I was
just
like,
straight up, not really,
dang,
no,
great axe.
no. And it's just two guys fighting, and I'm like, if we redid this, we could have him actually look at an actual war, like an actual battlefield, and I'm like, I want the blood because I feel like that would be more what people need nowadays because this is too simple. You need to traumatize them more now, I
You're
guess.
looking for the gritty reboot Netflix or
Yeah,
Amazon Prime series, right?
I don't know, like a combination of
Maybe
Henry Selick
Apple.
and Quentin
Apple
Tarantino
could
or
do it.
something. I don't know.
Wow. So this is
I'm
like
just being
you're
silly.
up in
No.
the ante. Apple. Then this is going to have to be Apple for the budget. Apple TV can handle this, but no, it did hit me though, and they even show like in a marketplace where there's two kids that are like just sitting there and they need food, and then he says like, I want to help them. There's got to be something
Yeah.
I can do to help children in need, and so we're already weaving in this kind of backstory of like, here's not so
Yeah.
subtle,
And the great
obviously,
act
but
kind of telling them that that's the purpose of man, but not everybody realizes that in their time is that to better themselves and help the people around them.
it's an interesting, yeah. When he asks him, why are there even people then? And he says, I wrote it down because I thought it's interesting. He says, to leave the world in some way better than he found it. Because he
Yeah.
says he's using the word man. He's like, why is there man? Why does he exist? And so then he says, will I be able to do that? And he says, yeah, you follow your star, which is kind of a nice nebulous piece of advice that is in this and also A Knight's Tale and probably other works of fiction as well, to do that. And by the way, that ties in with the whole Christmas thing, doesn't it? Following a star to find a good
Yep.
cause and a good purpose, by the way. That's probably the deeper meaning, not A Knight's Tale. They weren't anticipating it being in A Knight's Tale. That's
Yeah.
why that was my first pull.
Couldn't help it.
It wasn't in the 80s, so it won't show up on your podcast, but it's a good movie. Anyway.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so the interesting thing too, and this speaks to what they're trying to make, I think, of the character of Santa. Oh, and at this point, by the way, his name is Claus, not Santa. It's Claus. And they had
Yeah,
some
that's
reason,
what
some throwaway reason for it.
Necile, yeah, she did say why it was Claus because it meant something. And you're right,
Yeah.
I don't remember why
It
that
was one of
was.
those lines that was just to say, we got to name him that because that's what he's named in the stories.
That's what it felt like, yeah.
Kind of like when on that one Superman movie, when they're like, why do you have an S on your chest? And he's like, it's the symbol for peace. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Bullshit. That's an S, it stands for
Yeah.
Superman. But so, and just stop and think like, were any of us worried about the fact that it's there and that it means Superman? It would be dumb if it wasn't there, come on. So, whatever. But, so yeah, there's a reason. He's named Claus. So he goes from there to say, yes, I'd lost my train of thought and now it's back. The character of Claus that we're learning about, his reaction to this sort of upsetting, revelatory experience of seeing where he comes from and his fellow beings, he says, well, I'm going to go. And I think the wording was something like, it's a harsh, cruel world, but it's where I have to go, or something like that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he's just like, yeah, well put.
So, and one of the really cool things, I think, and this is another one that I'm kind of a sucker for. I'm a sucker for any team up story where there's like a team that's got each other's backs, and I start to weep openly when I watch it, and it's great. And it's fantastic. So even though he's leaving, you right away get the impression that he's not like leave the world of magic behind, and you won't ever, it's like, no, we're going to hang out and you take some friends with you and we'll show up anytime you need us and things, which is very much kind of more like a real family of like, oh, you found a place, we'll come help you move in and build you a nice house that looks like a church in this valley.
Yeah. It just overnight, like magic, because that's what it is.
So he settles in this, the valley of Ho Ha Ho, I think is what it's called, the laughing valley that's always winter. How many of us find a snowbound place and someone says, oh yeah, it's always winter here. And we go, cool. Is it haunted by invisible demons? Yes. All right, great. Well, I will live here then.
Yeah, accurate.
One thing that I thought was kind of funny, and it's so funny when I think about being a kid, I feel like, for all the carefreeness of it or whatever, I feel like I must have been kind of uptight when I was a kid, because I remember that it bothered me that Santa Claus invented the concept of a toy. I don't know why that bothered me so much when I was a kid. I was like, they're already toys. I don't get it. But I had forgotten.
Get that.
For years, I had forgotten that he invents toys. There was no concept of toys before he made one for this kid, right?
Yeah, but also Tingler had the word for it, so how could he have made the word for it? And he says it in different languages. He says Jugueta.
Yes, this is, again, it goes back to that thing of naming. Like, where are we naming him Claus? Shut up. That's why, because he has to be.
It's just a movie. Just relax.
Exactly.
Let it wash over you.
Yeah. It doesn't matter me now. It's just young Dwight in there yelling out, why did they call it? Because I did, when he's like, what should I call it? And he does some bird chirpy noise. Then he says the word toy. And he's like, toy, sure, that's what we're going with. And we're done. But
I was just always happy that I knew what he said in Spanish. And I was like, oh, Jugueta, that's toy.
So he was saying a word that was already there. Maybe in this reality, Claus is just somebody who likes to take credit for ideas. That's his one. Everyone needs a character flaw. He doesn't have any others. So
none of the kids he knew had them, so he didn't think they existed.
That's true. He didn't know how to be flawed. But we see this where he grows up rather. We see once again a little bit of montage where it shoots forward, and we. As far as we can tell, we don't have any indication, and this is probably on purpose, of him having any kind of job, or we don't know. He does seem to work with tools. He's got a workshop. He's building things, but the montage basically focuses on him playing with neighborhood kids, building a snowman with some kids,
reading to them a lot.
Reading to them, yes, on the steps. And so I think they did a good job of carrying forward this idea of here is someone who, when he was confronted with a world that sucked for kids, that he wanted to do something about it. And that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and they spent a long time because, he didn't make the first toy until he already had the white beard for the orphan boy. He just so happened to be whittling it to look like the cat, little Blinky that they had. that I love that Shiegra was like kind of jealous of because like you're gonna replace me with this cute little cat, you know? It's
And you're
so
like, you're an
adorable.
immortal lion. You're not aging. So I
Yeah,
think
you'll be okay.
now
But it
that
was so
begs the
cute.
question: was Blinky also an immortal cat? I don't know.
You would hope and get a little bit blessed, like a little like rubs
Yeah,
off a little
you'd
bit
hope
with its
so.
cute little yellow green eyes and
Yes.
everything.
So we have a wonderful song there. You know, he finds this kid in the snow who's from an orphanage. He makes him this little cat, and they decide to call it a toy. And then he ends up through the process of a montage song where the kids are singing about waking up to a surprise, and it's like, oh, okay. Once again, Santa, right? We're taking more steps towards getting his Santa game all on lock. And then by the end of the song, they all have one. So ostensibly, he made more of the toys and started giving them to kids, right? So as far as invisible demons go, where would we rate this on as 0 to 10? 10 being the best use of invisible demons, 0 being there's no invisible demons in something. This one's got to be 5 or higher.
At least. I love it.
It's great, right?
And when you can see them, they're just great too. And I'm just like, man, if you remade this, they could be really terrifying looking.
You have they're called aguas, is what they
Yeah.
call them, Agwas.
Aguas, not to
yeah.
be confused with the Spanish word agua.
Which is what I thought of when I was a kid, because I was like, aguas, where are they called aguas? But thanks to the cast of characters list on Amazon Prime, it's agua. I don't know why or whatever, it doesn't say, but they are in demons, monsters who can turn invisible, and they do look kind of scary.
Yeah, they do.
I remember that as a kid.
For Rankin and Bass, they were kind of like spooky looking, and then the fact that they could just be invisible all of a sudden was like,
Yes.
oh, like, oh. And then they have like little henchmen and stuff too, and I'm like,
little weird creatures and things. I really loved. Of course, we got Tingler, the little sound imp who is explaining to him, because we only find out about them by I think a rock thrown through a window with a note tied to it that's like, "Stop making toys."
Classic.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic intimidation tactics.
Stop making toys. XOXO King Agua. I don't.
Yeah.
I added
Stop
the
making
XOXO.
kids happy. Dang it.
Right. and Tingler tells him that the impetus for this is that the Aguas love to secretly influence children and make them do bad things, and if they're happy, they don't do bad things, which is what they like for whatever that does for them. And then I love, though, this is the other part, along with them having their creepy powers. He's like, oh, and by the way, they can turn invisible. Good night. And just leaves them in the workshop.
Santa's like, oh my God.
He's immediately kidnapped by the Aguas.
Yeah, he gets jumped by the Aguas. They just jump him in the forest. I'm like, dang, this is so brutal right now.
And
We're watching
leave him
Santa get jumped.
in a cave with a cobra and a giant spider. Just
Man.
where this is less than 1 minute of time on screen. It's like, boom, the Aguas exist. Now a giant cobra is going to kill you. This is where you get these things that happen in your childhood that go through your head. And I swear it's got to be at least once a month that in my head, I just want to go, come to me, ye nooks of the forest. This call that he does. He loosens his gag and he's like, come to me, ye nooks of the forest. And these nooks just show up and chase away the monsters. And they're like, who are you? Right.
How do you know us?
Yeah.
How'd you know that? Who told you that?
How did you know to call us?
It was like the pig knowing how to speak to sheep, and babe.
It was exactly like that. This is the Ba Ram U of the Oz universe. And that's a t-shirt right there. The Ba
New of the universe.
So now if anyone has that on an SAT test where it says Ba Ram U to come to me next to the forest is as something like that. There's some kind of a question there on the SATs. So but yeah, so they save him. That's good. And they just basically make it known, though, they're gonna mess with him. By the way, this really gave the animators, I know that we already said they look cool, but I'm gonna say it again. It really gave the animators who were making these, or whatever you call whoever makes, like claymation stop motion figures, a chance to really get into it a little. My favorite of the Aguas is the king, when he's got two huge horns and he's got one little earring hanging off of one of the horns. That's my favorite design piece, I think, in the whole, because it's just this little touch that like somebody thought of that and then did it, and I was like, good for that person.
But also, it's fun to think that Agua was like, something's missing, and he just puts a little ring, and he's like, that feels cool.
Need a little bit of
sesame.
Yes, there we go. Just need a little something there, a little asymmetry there.
I'm gonna add some flair.
And ironically enough, got it for Christmas. Anyway, but so as they're stealing their toys and they're loading up these caverns, they just keep showing up and taking. But yet Claus is like, nah, we're gonna keep making toys, right?
Yeah.
And we're just gonna keep doing it and try to figure out how to protect ourselves. This is what leads to the war. You've got the Great Ack shows up.
Dad's not happy. He's like, stop messing with my kid.
It was really giving Doctor Who for a minute there, I feel like, because he shows up and calls out King Agua, right? And he's like, you're messing with someone who's under my protection. That's just this quintessential like Doctor Who kind of moment, right? Where you get whoever looks the alien race in the face and is like, the Earth is under my protection. You can't mess around here, right? And much like in those cases, it's usually cooler to have them say, we don't care, we're going to fight it out anyway, and because then something's coming, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm channeling Doctor Who here a little bit too, because this also, there's a lot in this little moment where, so the Great Ack is like, back off. He's like, I'm not going to back off. And he's like, so you want to go to war? And he's like, yes, I want to go to war. And he's like, all right, then we're going to do it. And it's a little more engaging dialogue than what I just said. But
I'm about to go get my silver axe now.
Exactly.
You done asked for it.
He's busting out a silver axe, and he's like, I'm sorry that I have to wield you. The war can't be avoided. I've tried. I mean, it's kind of heavy there.
Yeah.
There is an episode of Doctor Who for anybody out there, and I don't know your affiliation with Doctor Who, Izzy. I'm not sure my
room's not TARDIS blue for any reason at all.
I was going to say, the whole room behind you is blue. So
it's completely
just wanted to make
decorated
sure. I figured. We're both podcasters, so we must at least have
bookshelf behind
familiarity.
me. You can't see it, but the bookshelf behind me on the sides are police boxes.
Very cool.
It's a police box.
Oh, nice. Very cool. All right, so we're good. But so do you remember A Good Man Goes to War? It was the name of one of the episodes, right?
Oh, I can never remember the names of the episodes, but I probably...
It's in one of the timelines with Matt Smith, not the Crack in the Wall one but kind of makes a little more sense, but the one that has more with the silence and Amy Pond and River and where River came from and all this kind of stuff. It happens somewhere around there, but basically the Doctor gathers up a bunch of his associates and friends from all corners of space and time and is going to go try to go against, I think, the silence idea. That season was a little confusing, but basically the premise is he's good, but you pissed him off. Right. And so when somebody who is good is going to fight, that they're fighting for something that is worth fighting for. Right. And so you're going to lose, basically, is the implication there. Yeah. And I really got that vibe as they're gearing up with their branches and their flowers and their magic, that they're going to go.
Yeah. And the Aguas just are like, oh, look at you with your branches. You guys ain't doing nothing. And then the axe, he doesn't actually chop anything with the axe. Spoiler. Like, it's a magic axe. I was like, oh.
And they clean up these Aguas. They really do.
He killed the last dragon and everything.
They come in, right, and they're all like turning them into flowers and then crushing the flower. And
again, this could be a lot more brutal if we redid it. Is just all I'm saying. And I mean, so much so towards the end, they're just like, "Oh, Claus, don't worry about it. By the way, all the Aguas have perished," and we didn't see that. It was so bloody they didn't even show it. I can
After
know.
dispatching several on screen, and you're right, with one of which is a laser blast or magic blast from the axe that disintegrates one of them, basically. And then they go, and this is all, I mean, there's no blood on screen, obviously, which is what, annoys you about it. But
No, it's just, I'm just saying there could be.
no, but I see what you mean on the, you make the more adult version forever. So I get you. I get you. No, but they chase them off, right? And as I'm watching this, like I'm in my head, I'm just thinking like, oh, they chased them off. And then the next scene is the great act literally telling Claus, like, don't worry about it. They've all perished. It's like, oh, that got a little darker there.
Yeah.
Like something went down off screen when they ran away. Because
We
it
hunted
does
them
end with him
down.
saying, get them. And they go after them. And then, cut to, there's no more aguas. They are extinct now.
Yeah, it was too much for our innocent little eyes. They had to
Right.
just off-screen type of thing.
And so it kind of gets in with, once again, this whole balancing of the whole thing of like this kind of weightiness and this that life is not just happy froofy, and yet you have someone who is making his whole life's work about creating toys and sharing joy to make kids happy, right?
Yeah.
In this world. And I think, so once again, as a kid, I watched it and I kind of was like, this is kind of weird, but it got bright colors and cool characters and little creatures and monsters and stuff. It was fun enough to kind of, I was watching it, but I had this weird kind of like, I don't, why is this so much weirder and different than a Santa Claus story usually would be? And then as I think with a little more maturity, when I look at that, I'm like, it's kind of pretty cool actually to show,
Yeah.
what does it take for a Santa Claus character to exist within a world that is so not conducive to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if there's anything real significant before it jumps to the end. I mean, he gets some jumping reindeer that seem to jump really far, and
Yeah,
I think,
that the Nook helps them out with, but they
Yeah.
can only leave every once a year. Yeah, and then they're going over the valley, and he starts laughing in the ho 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 type way. So that's where we get that
That's right.
jolly old Saint Nick kind of thing.
yeah,
And but basically, I love when he, because they retrieve all of the toys that the Agua stole from them because they only have one day to do it, and that's in 10 days, and they don't have enough toys or whatever. And of course, right in the nick of time, they get all the toys, and they're able
the
to get them all
Saint Nick
all
of
done.
time. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. And I love that when he delivers them, and they're just like, "Oh, he delivered them in the night and went down our chimney." And the dad's just like, "He's a saint. He can do whatever he wants. He wants to come down our chimney. He can. He's welcome to." I'm like, "Okay, Dad." Like,
And that's a cool little, but it is funny, and it's another one of those naming things that I remember. I remembered that from way back, is because the kids are like, "What? Claus brought us gifts," because they know who he is, But they're like, "But he didn't come in," and then he's like, "Oh, a saint like Claus can come in however he wants, whatever." And they go, "Saint Santa." And it's like, all right, that was a
Santa.
quick jump to get to the Santa Claus
Yeah.
there, but that's great. No need to belabor the point. But it's
Nope.
a cute little scene, and the kids are all excited. And then you kind of close on the two parents embrace and kiss, and the camera pans out, and there's a mistletoe over them. I have no idea if he also invented mistletoe. That's not addressed in this particular story. It's more of a Norse thing, but I don't know, whatever. But it's a cute little thing that kind of showcases, I think, the idea, and this is always tricky because I think translation of recognition of something happening, something like special, being cared for, being loved. That's, I think, when the Santa Claus story is at its best, right? Is when the toys are just a means to explain being cared for, that someone considers you,
Mm-hmm.
And so
Because he had built that whole relationship, but beforehand by being there for them when no one else seemingly wasn't, like nobody
Yes.
was looking out for them.
Exactly. That's a great point, is because he got to see that. And they don't really hang a lantern on this, but he's an orphan too. I don't think they ever even say that. I mean, he's adopted into a wonderful magical family, obviously, Encanto style,
Yeah.
but he is, because they're a magic family. That's why I said Encanto. I don't know. Anyway,
I got it.
they're also a family. They have magic. So there we go. That didn't seem like too big a leap in my head. But he is also an orphaned human, right? We don't have any. If this were made now, I fear they would go down the path of being like, where were his parents? And let's go and, we don't need that, I don't think, in this case. But he's taking care
Yeah, and
of
neither did
kids.
he, because he was so taken care of. He never even like bothered like, who are my real parents? Like, these are my real parents, the
Yeah.
great Ack and all of these other people raised me. I was raised by a village.
So we finally cut back to it, and as it turns out, they have a mantle of immortality in a box that they just have. Once again, I'm sure probably this is probably one of those things that the book probably has a whole chapter about, right? Who knows? If it was written by Tolkien, it would be like 3 whole books about where this box came from. But take that, J.R.R. Tolkien. Anyway, so they mentioned that, hey, we've got this mantle of immortality and we'd like to give it to him. But no other human has been worthy of this. We've never even talked about using it. We just have it out there propping up that other table or something. It's just something we never planned on using, I guess. In fact, they say, I think at some point someone's like, yeah, so, I mean, what are we going to do with it if not this, right?
Yeah. Who better to bestow upon but my son, who I practically raised?
Right. And at this point, this is where a line that I have remembered ever since I was a kid, because it's from my favorite character, when the commander of the Wind Demons says, "Your story has touched even my cold, windy heart." And so
yes, they want him.
Unanimously, they decide to do this, and you cut to this light that shines and lights, and you have this little touching kind of goodbyes. They decorate a Christmas tree, Santa and Tingler and the lion.
Yeah,
Chiagra, sorry, yeah,
Chiagra, yeah.
Yeah, I just blanked on the lion's name, but
it happens to me all the time.
So they decorate this tree, and he says, "It's okay. It's okay. I'm mortal. Everything that's mortal has to die." And they have this goodbye, which once again, we already know, that the immortality is coming, obviously, but he doesn't. And so they still chose to leave that moment in, which I thought was another cool choice. If they're really going for this whole thing of like the world is kind of scary, and things like Santa and the whole Santa deal make the world a little more tolerable, a little less scary, maybe, right?
Yeah, and he invented Christmas tree decorating.
Apparently, they didn't. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say hang a lantern. I think he does literally hang a lantern on the tree, but he says decorate this tree every year or something. And I was like, did he invent Christmas trees too? Let's go. Calm down there, Claus. All right, you don't have to take. Oh no, you spilled an egg inside of that nog that you were drinking. Well, let's just call it eggnog from now on. But we see that in closing, we get the idea of the whole thing, which is he's thanking the great Ack for giving him immortality, and he says that in the whole world, there's nothing as beautiful as a happy child. I mean, I got the words exactly right on that. Is that what he says? Something like that.
Yeah, pretty much that. Yeah.
So, so overall, this is not a new one for either of us necessarily, but where would you put this in your Christmas canon of specials? Let's make one of those annoying memes that people make and say, you can only keep 2. No, we're not going to do that. I hate those things on social media. It's like, you can only keep 2, Kazam or Blockbuster or something like that. Anyway, maybe my algorithm's screwed
I don't know,
up.
for
Nobody
this
knows what I'm
one,
talking about. Yeah.
it's probably my least watched one because they didn't show it as often. I mean, I still wound up watching it, but I feel like I didn't really see it until I was a little older, maybe like 11 or 12. Whereas the other ones I was already, like well versed in, because they always, played, Here Comes Santa Claus, or Santa Claus Comes to Town, and all of those other ones.
And isn't that funny?
But I do like this one because it's so different. Well, the first time I really like saw it, I was like, oh man, this one's kind of scary, but also really good. Different.
Yes. Yeah, it's one that
I like this one.
I like it quite a bit, and I like it more even than I did when I was a kid. Because, like I said, my first reaction to it was what, and then we would kind of sort of teasingly watch it sometimes. It'd be like, "This is silly," and I remember my brother and sister and I, just randomly booming out like, "Never were babies we," or something like that. One of the lines from the Immortality song. And it was fun, right? Does that make sense? It was like fun, and there was like a world to kind of think about there. So there's a lot to it. I really like it quite a lot. And it's one of those that, once again, I always think is funny because, it was very much an every year for me, just because it happened to make it onto there. Onto the VHS that we taped. And so therefore it was like every year that was one of the traditional ones that we would watch.
Yeah, and this was like one of the last Christmas specials that the official Rankin and Bass put out, 85. That was already towards the end of their run in general.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think for especially for the Christmas movies, I think maybe they have one other one, but it wasn't specifically Rankin and Bass,
It was just Rankin or just Bass.
It was like just an older version under the Rankin and Bass like production, if that makes sense. Because I know I was looking it up. I was like, oh, I didn't know.
I didn't know that either. Was it Jack Frost? That's another one that I've seen.
I know that this is getting released on a certain date, but I think it's interesting that the original release date is December 17th.
Oh, really? Is that when we're?
Yeah.
That's today. That's when we're recording.
That's today. And I was like, wow.
Wow. So this is the commemorative episode. It is getting released. The plan is this should be released actually on Christmas Eve day. This is the episode that's getting out then. So, but it was recorded on you said 1985. So in this day,
and this is their final stop motion style Christmas story. This is their officially the very last one that they put out.
40
that's stop motion style for Christmas.
Ago, yeah.
Yeah, 39. Yeah, well, yeah, about to be 40.
About to be 40 years old. We're going to throw it a party where we have black balloons and candles and give it a cane as a joke for its birthday.
Over the hill. Yeah. Coffin cake and everything.
I hope that everybody out there has a happy holiday. And I always like to say, if you are into holidays of whatever kind, if you're into Christmas, if you're not, I hope everybody doesn't mind me indulging my own, this time of year. That's the one that I know the best. And so that's the holiday that I tend to highlight out of this. But if you do, whatever holidays that you do observe, or if you don't observe any, I hope that you still are having a good time at this time where people take a minute to acknowledge this kind of end of the year, this kind of deep, dark winter that we're in, and the fact that we all are still here and we get to survive and pull through together and go on into a new year. So I hope everybody has a happy, happy time. Izzy, tell people, where do they follow you and your exciting podcasting work?
So I'm part of the Rabbit Hole Podcast Network. So you can go to rabbitholepodcast.com and see all of our network episodes, but you can also find specifically Hearsing Around, where I'm a co-host with 3 others. That'd be Brenda, Carl, and Chris. And we kind of go over the lives of the recently deceased celebrities. So we mention their life, but mostly it's us kind of digesting whatever movies we can. So that's always a little fun learning experience for me, because sometimes I try to stay in a specific bubble and it forces me out of that bubble because research is important. So I'll watch it whether I think I'm going to completely like it or not sometimes. And I've watched, some actors just pay the bills. And I've seen plenty of movies that are like, oh, this is just to pay a bill. And I get that.
It's interesting.
Like,
when someone does, especially someone who during whatever, sometimes the last half or more of their career, of their life in the spotlight, is playing certain roles and things. I imagine there's certain people of an exact certain window of age who are going to always think of Hugh Grant as the guy that was in those weird roles and, goofy kind of acting and like Paddington and Dungeons and Dragons and, Wonka and stuff, who aren't going to be like, even who will be exactly in that surprised space to be like, wait, he was like a heartthrob in rom-coms, and not have any concept of that, or I think, so it's fascinating. It's a very interesting show for that reason when you guys talk about that.
Yeah, it's nice to know he's on your bingo card now. All right, I got you locked in for that one. Noted. You just
Yeah.
put a mark on him. We try to avoid, like, one of us, I think Brenda, she's not allowed to Google people to see if they're alive because she's accidentally killed someone before.
Oh no.
Not really.
Cursed.
Not really, but it was just timing. Yeah. She looked it up and then soon they passed and she was like, oh no.
That's a terrible feeling.
It just so happened that they passed and she's just like, I can never do that again.
Well, just to be clear, I'm wishing Mr. Grant all the best. Have no wishes for his demise at all. So I'm sending him some vitamins right now for Christmas. Let me just send those.
Sorry about that. And then we have also, that's Bodacious Dude, where it's just me and whatever guest I have. And we just talk about 80. There's specifically an 80 set list that I have of 80s movies. And so you were, of course, on the episode for Return to Oz, which is definitely a great one. So if you guys like that movie, check it out. If you've never heard of it, go watch it. It's weird and awesome.
And fun. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you do a lot. You do a lot of really great things. You're on Reels of Justice quite a bit. You've done several on there, and they've been on this show as well. But but you do a lot of really cool, fun work that's out there, and I think that kind of ties in. One of the things that I like about podcasting is that we're hopefully we're the same as Santa Claus, Izzy. That's what I'm trying to say. No, we're hopefully bringing a little bit of joy into people's day while they are driving around, doing the dishes, weeding their garden, whatever it is they're doing while doing their grocery shopping, something like that, while they're listening. That hopefully makes your day a little brighter out there for everybody, So.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Izzy, for being here and talking about this.
Thank you for having me.
Happy holidays.
This was super fun. Thank you so much. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.